SAT of the college that you applied to and didn't get into is a better predictor of your economic future than the school you went to.
Hi, this is Dr. Jed McCosco at academicinfluence.com and Wake Forest University. Today we have Professor Jeff Stake, who is a law professor and has looked at a lot of different rankings, particularly U.S. News and World Report, and his own ranking, the ranking game. So he's kind of been around the block when it comes to ranking colleges in the ways that are typically done. Dr. Stake, you had a chance to look at our website. So what are your sort of initial impressions of academicinfluence.com?
Well, I haven't looked at your whole site, but I've looked at it a little bit. And the first thing that I like is that you have different ways of essentially ranking or looking at qualities of schools. And it's very important for people to keep in mind, and this is, beyond very important, it's critical, that different people are looking for different things in schools. And so the very fact that your site starts out by having people choose what they want to look at is an important reminder of that fact. So that's good. How you have done the things within those sections, I don't know that. So I can't comment at all on with the different types of the influence or other types of things. So that's beyond me at this stage. But I like the fact that immediately you're confronted with, how do I want to evaluate these schools? The job of educational evaluation is extremely important, extremely complicated. There are people that spend their whole lives dedicated to that question, and there aren't easy answers to a lot of this. But I think a lot of people would say it's hard to boil it down into one number, and at least as you start to look at different criteria, that makes sense. If somebody wants to know what the biggest school is, that might be something that does boil down to one number, but there are other things that don't. One of the things that's troubling, really, even within law schools, is that the evaluation systems are not really designed to report on. Although it's hard to do, I'm not saying it would be easy to do, but they're not designed to report on what a student might want to know to go into a given kind of field. Do they want to be a practitioner? Do they want to be a planner? Well, they're all practitioners in a way, but do they want to be planning? Do they want to be doing litigation? Do they want to be working for the government? Do they want to be working for not-for-profits? Do they want to be working in the environmental field? There are so many different things, and schools are better or worse at different things within those categories. And so it's important for people when they look at any kind of academic aid in getting them to get to a right choice or a good choice. I don't know if there is a right choice, but a good choice for a school to go to, that they're reminded constantly that they should be thinking about lots of different factors. And U.S. News and other single summary numbers really don't do that at all. They reinforce just the opposite, and they reinforce it in ways that are very very troubling and very misleading. Ranks themselves, which U.S. News eventually publishes, right? They do publish the numbers, so I give them credit for that. So you can actually get the numbers. But I just looked at this year's numbers. One of my pet peeves really is that if you look, you can imagine, and I won't even mention the schools, but you can imagine schools ranked, say, 3 and 6 or something like that. Not being very far apart. They're in the top group, number 3 or number 6, something like that. And if you look at that difference, I think that difference is 5 points in the U.S. News numbers, whatever those numbers are. It comes out to 5 points. I could check on that. But then you take that same 5 points and you say, well, what does 5 points do further down the scale? And so you look and you find out that it's the same difference between a school ranked 28 and a school ranked 45. So if you could rationally say, well, I'll go to school 6 instead of school 3, you could also just as rationally, even if all these numbers are right, setting that aside, but you could just as rationally say, I'll go to 45 instead of 28. But 45 and 28 sound like they're a long way from each other. But they're not. They're just as far from each other as School 3 and School 6 are on U.S. News's criteria, which I don't defend to start with. And they have stuff built into it. Like, for example, what would you rather do? Would you rather be a top student at a lower ranked school or a middle student at a higher ranked school?
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Exactly. I don't know either. I don't know the answer for myself. But what does U.S. News assume? They assume that the higher the LSAT, the better the place is for you. But the higher the LSAT and the higher the grades, the more likely you're going to be in the middle of the class. I don't mean you personally.
No, I get it.
But,
yeah.
So the very thing they're pointing to and putting 22% or whatever it is of their weight on is a factor that is ambiguous from a student's point of view. You might say, I want to be with the best students around I can be with because I will learn from them and I will interact with them, and that's how I'm going to get great legal training. And that could be completely right. Or you could say, I want to be where I'll be at the top of the class. I'll be on the Law Journal, and I will get the job offers because the firms come in and they look for the law review people, and they don't pay that much attention to whether I'm a little higher or lower ranked in the schools. And I will get all the credit from professors, and I will have special treatment because I did things, at the school that very few people could do. That's rational too, but that's not the way U.S. News sees it. U.S. News sees it as this is better. You should be going to the school that has a higher LSAT.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not true.
Yeah. Well, it's just fun to talk to you. Clearly, you've thought about this over many years, and you have actually, talked about the echo effect that U.S. News and World Report has had on law school, probably on other things as well. What do you think, first of all, describe a little bit again about the echo effect and how you proved it was there, because I don't think people really understand that.
Yeah, well, it's not a proof in the mathematical sense, but it's sort of a proof in the statistical sense. So what I did, and then I got the help of a statistician to help me do a second time around, but was to take almost all the data that U.S. News has and say, here are the ranks that U.S. News publishes, and then what happens to the different subscores the following fall or the following spring after they've published that. So if School Z goes up 4 points in the ranking in year 0, and then, or I'll say year 1 compared to year 0, goes up 4 points, then what happens in year 2 when you look at the students who apply, when you look and the LSAT and the GPA, and when you look at the professional reputation among the peer schools, what about the professional reputation among lawyers and judges? And I found that all four of those things go up after U.S. News publishes an increase in rank, or go down after U.S. News publishes a decrease in rank. So U.S. News is itself influencing the criteria that they're using to rank schools. And so what they're hearing is essentially an echo of their own report. And so they publish this thing and it says, here's the rank, and all the different groups pay attention to it. The students pay attention to it. The faculty pay attention to it. The lawyers pay attention to it. And then when U.S. News does its survey, they get the same information back that they already published.
Well, I mean, I don't disagree that you have found something which I think is probably true, okay? But playing devil's advocate, couldn't somebody say, well, U.S. News is following an upward trend that just keeps going up, or following a downward trend?
No, because it can go up or down. It doesn't just go up or doesn't just go down. And so it goes both ways. And this is what it takes the statistician to do, and I couldn't do on my own. There's some sophisticated statistical techniques that are used to determine which one's following which.
Oh, okay. Well, very cool.
And so
we'll have to read your papers to convince ourselves that this is all real, but I'm sure it is, because everybody pays attention to those rankings in a way that is pretty amazing when you think about it.
It's stunning.
Yeah, this was supposed to be
how much attention they're paid.
Yeah, I mean, if you learn the history of this, it was supposed to be sort of a gimmick that increased readership of the U.S. News and World Report. It was falling behind
Right.
Times and Newsweek, and so this is trying to boost it up. And now it's definitely, the journal itself has kind of gone by the wayside. This is New U.S. News and World Report. It's kind of funny.
That's
The dog
exactly
is
right.
the tail's wagging the dog now, sort of
Yeah.
in this ranking.
Yeah.
But there are a lot
Yeah.
of other rankings out there. So I mean, you've mainly focused on U.S. News and
Well,
World Report? Have you looked at other
there
ones?
are, but if and I acknowledge that in some areas other rankings are either more important or equally important to U.S. News. One of the things that bothers me is that in the law area, really U.S. News is the big player. Students walk into to law fairs where undergrad. So, for example, admissions committees. I'm the chair of admissions at IU, but the admissions committees will go and send a representative to a school, Illinois or anywhere, Ohio State, any place else, and they all sit at tables, and it's law fair day or whatever they call it, and the students walk around and they talk to different schools. And so they'll look at the school. There'll be a little poster that says Indiana University, and they'll look at the school and they'll walk up and talk to them. Well, what do you have at Indiana University, and how much does it cost, and things like that. And a lot of students will have U.S. News in their hand, and they will look up they go to Indiana University, and then they'll look down and they'll see whatever it is this year, and they'll go, okay, and they move on to the next school, and or they come to talk to us, whatever it is. But they are making initial cut decisions based on U.S. News and almost nothing else. And it's sort of horrifying, actually, to think that they're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Another horrifying thing, another colleague of mine, and we didn't publish this, a different colleague, and I studied from, I think it was lawschoolnumbers.com. There's a site where students used to put in the amount of scholarships that they got from different schools, and then they'd put in what school they chose to go to eventually. And of course, some people, this is all self-reported data, so you could take it with a grain of salt. But and then so we scraped that data and we analyzed it, and students on average were paying $10,000-$20,000 for a step up of one in the rankings.
Wow. That does not seem cost effective.
No.
Interesting.
No, definitely not. So it's not really rational at that point. So,
wow.
And again, back to my earlier point about rankings, some of these rankings are very small. Now, let me add a caveat. That was at the top of the range. So once you get down to the middle of the range of the schools, they were not paying $10,000 or $20,000 for a step of one.
Okay.
But once you got into the top 10, now they're starting to pay big money to step up one. And it's not even clear, to go back to the criteria, that these are even better schools because if they're being ranked higher in U.S. News or better for that student.
Well, it definitely has changed the game. It used to be probably that you would go to a law school for the education that you get and for the smarts that you would get that then you would use when you got out. But now it seems like you're going to get a little trophy or a little pedigree that says, I went to this ranked school. Do you think that that's partly why more of the recent presidents have had Ivy League or top schools in their pedigree, and the previous presidents, it wasn't that case, presidents of the United States? And is this where we're headed?
Wow. Well, I'd thought of a lot of effects of U.S. News, but I'd never thought of effects on choosing a president.
Well,
but,
or what other effects? These are just things that
No.
came to my mind. The last 5 presidents and stuff.
No.
Go ahead.
I like your question. I'm not making fun of it. I like your question because it does get into the heads of people, and people start to think, oh, well, they're the best because they went to an Ivy League school or whatever, ignoring that some of the great people we've had throughout history came from a lot of places that they'd never heard of. And that schools don't necessarily make that much difference anyway. One of the things that I wanted to make sure and mention, and you probably know about this, but your audience might not, was a study by Stacey Dale and Alan Kruger, an economic study. Now, this is more having to do with money, so I acknowledge that's a limitation, but showing that that the how did this go? the school that you applied to and didn't get in, the SAT of the college that you applied to and didn't get into, is a better predictor of your economic future than the school you went to.
Now that is interesting. So people who reach for the stars may
Yeah,
be either sort of an optimist that determines that they're going to make money in the long run, or B, they're from a wealthy family that says you should apply to these top schools, and they're also from a wealthy family that helps them get a start in life and business, and therefore they do well. So of those two
right.
choices, which one do you think is the bigger factor here?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, and there may be others as well, but the but it's sort of mind-boggling to think that it's not the school you went to, but the school you didn't go to that determines more of your future economically.
Wow.
And and I think this goes back to the point of people paying a lot of money for stuff that they may not. This is not really necessarily rational behavior for them to be doing this. They had done another study as well, so that it's worth reading them. But they're basically undermining the idea that all these prestige factors are necessarily going to lead to a better economic outcome in the future. Now, there are subgroups actually within some of the studies that do better. So if you're from an underprivileged background and you manage to get into one of these schools that will put you in contact with people who are in the elite, then that may be an important step for you to take. But if you're already within the elite or already in a fairly well-educated family, then what school you go to doesn't make as much difference as you might think.
Hmm.
So a lot of the whole point of the ranking is to find something that's going to be beneficial in the long run, and yet some of their studies sort of undermine the idea
Mm-hmm.
that these differences play out in the way that you'd expect them to.
Yeah.
Um, so one more thing about that I can't resist saying
Go ahead.
that bugs me about this, and I'm happy to answer more questions, but I just got to get this off my chest in a sense, is the effect that these rankings have on the schools themselves.
Hmm.
And so they start to give priority in a greater way than they used to LSAT or SAT and grades from before that and other factors, because that's what fits into the ranking and makes them look better,
Mm-hmm.
instead of trying to choose the people. For example, oh, that person was a person who served in the military and did a great job in foreign overseas when they were in the military. Well, but their LSAT's no good. Forget about that person. And so we're overlooking people, I think, across the nation in law schools and undergrad institutions as well, who might be really good candidates, but they're not doing anything for our numbers. And so we're sort of saying, well, maybe not so important. Now,
Yeah.
if you go back, 2 slides to what I was saying before, maybe it doesn't hurt that person that much, but it still seems unfair to me that people are being overlooked because their numbers weren't so hot, when at least the data 30 years ago would have said that that shouldn't have been that important. We changed not because we realized how important the SAT was, but we changed because we realized how important U.S. News was, and U.S. News says the SAT is important to their rank. And
Yeah.
so there are other effects like that. Law schools now have transfer programs that they didn't used to have barely at all when I was in law school, and now they have these big transfer. Why? Because you can shrink your class, have higher LSAT and grade point average, and then to get your money, you bring in students from other schools after that, and then they fill out the ranks, and you get tuition from those.
Wow.
And so what does it do? It just takes 100 people or 50 or whatever the number is, and it means that they have to switch law schools in the middle of their law school
Yeah.
careers. So it's damaging to the curriculum. I get a student like that, and I can't count on them having a certain thing in the first year because they took a first year course at some other law school. And so, but schools are doing it because U.S. News is so important, and the rankings are so important to the choices. So it's having a feedback effect on our educational system as well as on the students.
Wow. Well, I do have more questions, and since you're willing to take them, one of the questions I have is, what is the future for law school? I mean, in terms of online program, and programs at smaller schools, programs at state schools. Because from my vantage point in the undergraduate and physics graduate world, people are less and less likely to pay big money for programs that are not what they would consider premier. So unless you're in the top 50 undergraduate universities in the nation, or if you're in one of the inexpensive state schools in your home state, you're really not that excited to spend $70,000 a year on an education that you could get online. Is that the same way it feels to students in law school who don't get into one of the top law schools or into a state law school like where you teach?
I'm not sure how it feels to students, at least comparing what they had hoped to get into versus what they did get into. So for some students, the best they could get into is Indiana University, and they're delighted to be here. For other students, they might have turned down, perhaps, although it doesn't happen much, but turned down a higher ranked school because we gave a better scholarship or something like that. So I don't know whether they ever regret their decisions if they had other choices. But I agree that they view, well, the cost has gone up a lot. And so there's more consumerism sort of naturally because the cost has gone up so much. When I went to undergrad and law school, it cost a lot less. And so I didn't worry about the money very much. Now they have a rational worry about the money and the debt that they've incurred in order to go to law school. So they have to, in order to make it feel good, they have to feel like there's going to be an outcome that will be worth this. In the legal world, there's been a study of this that was done years ago, and I don't know if it's been updated at all, but the study that was done a decade or two ago indicated the payoff from law school was still pretty good. Now, not necessarily from the very sketchy law schools that many people don't even pass the bar after going to the law school. So the schools that have a very low bar pass rate, you have to wonder about whether they're getting what they're paying for. Now, they could be just wanting an education in the law, and that's fine. I have nothing against that. But if they're thinking they're going to be a lawyer and then they don't pass the bar, that may not be a real great payoff for them. So count out some of the schools. I'm not including all law schools, but within a lot of the law schools, the payoff was pretty good to a law degree. And so it was a good investment for the students. They might feel like they wish they'd gone someplace else where the payoff might be better. But I think once they get into law school and they go and they put in a lot of time and effort, for the most part, I don't think many are looking back at I wish I'd been somewhere else. Now, there are exceptions to that, and that would be the people who had hoped to be employed in the extreme case, wanted to go to the Solicitor General's office, if they even knew what that was, and in the Department of Justice. Well, not many people make it there. It's only a few schools that send very many people there. And if they wanted to go there and then they went to law school, thought, I can't get to the Solicitor General's office, they could be disappointed about that. But I don't think they're very disappointed comparing the different schools they could have gotten into. With regard to online, which was the other half of your question,
yes,
I was just 2 years ago very worried about that because I thought, just do it online. It's a lot cheaper. We're going to all be replaced by a great lecture by somebody, and that's the future of legal education. Now, I knew it wasn't the complete future of legal education, but I was pretty concerned about it. The pandemic changed my thinking entirely. My students are so much happier to be in person, in a classroom now this semester, than they were last year when they were online. I asked them, this is just coincidental that you asked me about this, but I asked them just last week, how are you feeling about this semester? Because for me, it's kind of a mixed bag. I can't see their faces because they're behind masks, and so I can't see them smile, whereas when it was online, I could see them smile or laugh or whatever, and so I don't get as much feedback. And because I wear glasses a lot of the time, my mask fogs up my glasses, so I can't even see what's left of their face. So for me, it's a lot harder than it was when I was teaching online. For them, the ones I asked, it's a world of difference. They are so happy to be in person, seeing the teacher, talking to their peers. They don't mind the masks. They don't mind all the other routines that we're going through. They are delighted. All the ones I talked to. Now, maybe I didn't get the right people, but I was pleasantly surprised. It was like, oh, good. One, it reaffirms I'm glad to be back in the classroom and doing something useful for them. But if that's the way they feel, we're not going to wipe out in-person law schools with online law schools very quickly. And you can easily imagine why. But I would have thought, especially because the students are so flexible, they're young. You think, oh, well, they got used to online and now they come back in person. And it's sort of disappointing that, it's not really that much different and they have to go through these stupid routines and they have to walk to class. And no, that was not their attitude at all.
Wow.
I was so glad to be back here. So,
well, that is encouraging.
I think that. Well, we sometimes hope as teachers that there's this interpersonal connection that we're making, and that the student's saying something and we're responding to something. And when you get, now it could happen online, but it doesn't happen as well online. And so I think that, and especially in a big class where they don't seem to talk very much at all because there's so many other people on the screen or whatever. And but I can have a class of 60 or 70 students and they're raising their hands and they're talking and so I was relieved, if you want to put it that way, but glad to hear that in-person teaching will carry on for a while, and that the pandemic at least has reinforced the importance of developing that relationship between the teacher and the student and the dialogue that goes on between the teacher and the student. If you had just a plain old lecture, then I don't know, maybe a lecture online would be just about as good. But it's but I lecture a lot, and the students were much happier to have me lecture in person than lecture online.
Good. Well, it has been really fun to talk to you, Professor Stake, and I'm really glad that you've spent so much time thinking about the issues of ranking and also the issues of what is the future for law education in the United States and elsewhere. So thank you for taking the time to share all that with us. We really appreciate it.